Welcome back to the Living Process. My name is Greg Madison, and my guest this time is Mia Leijssen. Mia is very well known in the focusing community as well as the person-centered world and the experiential and existential communities of psychotherapy. She's Professor Emeritus from University of Leuven, where she was professor of clinical psychology for many years. And she's published very widely. Some of her academic papers are on microprocesses of focusing and spirituality and existential well-being. And she also has a course on existential well-being, which you can access online. The links to her website are in the show notes, so you can find out more about her really interesting work that really spans over decades. In this episode, Mia talks a little bit about how she first was introduced to focusing and met Gendlin, and also a little bit about the client-centered world and its interaction with the focusing process. And we speak quite a bit about subtle energy and how important that is in Mia's understanding of what happens in felt sensing and in listening to someone who's focusing, the interaction between people. And it also kind of opens up this area of spirituality. So a very, very interesting conversation from my point of view, and I hope you really enjoy it. The Living Process with Mia Leijssen. Good morning, Mia.
Good morning, Greg.
Yeah, very nice to have you. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you. I have in mind some of the things we might talk about, but we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that I'd be curious about is just how you got into focusing or Gendlin's work or whatever the doorway was for you.
Okay. It started already very early in my training as a psychotherapist. At the University of Leuven, we already read his papers on creation of meaning and all this stuff that he published in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was at the university in this time from 1996 until 1975. I had my training as a psychologist and psychotherapist, and we had a lot of reading material from Gendlin. And I was already fascinated at the time by that, but the really breakthrough came when Gendlin was at the University of Leuven as a guest professor during 1 month. And then we had several workshops with him. And I was his client in one of his demonstration sessions. And that was really such a turning point in my life, because it was really the first time that I could experience how powerful it is when someone invites you to listen to your body.
Mm-hmm.
And that was quite new in this academic environment.
Yeah.
And that was such a powerful experience for me. It was really a breakthrough in a long time of slightly depressive mode after some problems with the birth of my child. And this experience with Gendlin, I experienced him as really a midwife of a very bodily felt experience that opened up a whole story of what my body still remembered of this quite traumatic event. And that was like, oh wow. And it was so simple. He was just sitting there, and he invited me to bring my attention in the body, and immediately I got in touch with such a deep experience. So that was the beginning of what I could say a deep love story.
Yeah. So for some reason, I think this is unusual, but for some reason, his writing was already included on the course. So you
Yes,
had, yeah, you had an introduction to him kind of conceptually.
yes,
And then he came and you had this opportunity to experience with him.
yes,
And it was that personal experience that made you really feel that this was something important for you.
yes. And also, what was quite new was his way of being present. I was touched very much by the quality of his presence. There was such a natural connection in how he
Mhm.
was sitting there. He didn't say much,
Mhm.
and nevertheless, he was very pure in his attention, and that was such a powerful experience for me.
That's so interesting that just the attention or the presence without doing anything can be so impactful.
Yes, yes.
How do you understand that? I'm curious.
Uh, I understand that as the most powerful impact that making a connection with someone else
Yeah.
from this heartfelt level
Hmm.
um, is such a powerful tool. And when I say tool, it's too poor to express the importance. It brings in this subtle, energetic um, difference in the interaction. Um, we are always sensitive to it, but we often don't um, notice it, or we are not aware of how powerful the impact is of the quality of the interaction.
Hmm.
Um, and the quality of the interaction works in different ways. It can work in a way that you get frozen and stuck,
Hmm.
and that you can't develop
Hmm.
anything new, and it can be the opposite, like with Gendlin, this the warmth in his interacting qualities
Yeah.
is brings really in this power of giving a safe environment where you can relax and where you can open up to the more that's there but not yet in your conception, so that you don't find word for yet.
Yeah.
So this is for me the most essential, this quality of the interaction
Yeah.
that opens, or it can be something that closes you,
Hmm.
and that also closes all new possibilities to come forward.
Yes. I when I hear you say that, I find myself thinking that the majority of my interactions in the world are the second kind,
Mm.
that in some way they push me off course, or they close me down a little bit, or they um, make me want to give up in some
Mm.
way, you know. Um, but it's interesting, you describe it, at one point, you described it as energy.
Yes.
And that there's something about the difference in that kind of energy that's provided when you open up. Something about that different environment facilitates deeper and greater awareness in the person that's being listened to.
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I find that so mysterious that the
It
process
is.
in the person needs a very particular openness or something. How do you understand that mystery?
Uh, I, for me, it's important that we can recognize that it is something of a mystery.
Yeah.
Like life is something of a mystery. We can create certain conditions to open up to it, to welcome it, and to nourish life.
Mm-hmm.
But how life starts, this is still a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's important that we don't just say, oh, it's a mystery, so we
Yeah.
don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
It's this combination of recognizing that it is a mystery, and at the same time noticing how we can open up our awareness to come in contact with the mystery, because it is present everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in nature,
Mm-hmm.
it is no contradiction to recognize how mysterious it is, how life develops, and at the same time noticing how we have access to the mystery by connecting to the natural processes and the natural cycle in life, and how we as human beings are part of nature, are part of the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, by being aware, we can open up more to it and discover more about it, and also being like a creator of it also. We are receiver and creator at the same time.
Mm.
Like we can create conditions
Mm-hmm.
that develop life, that encourage living forward. So it is this balance between being receptive and taking steps in it, creating conditions for it, giving words to it to carry it forward.
Yes. When you say that, I think you're making a distinction between being receptive and being passive.
Yes.
That we have to be receptive to kind of be open enough so that what is there becomes more present on the one hand, but we also have to have an intention to create the conditions so that that happens. There's something actively required of us, as well as then a kind of a letting go.
I found it very helpful to look to processes in nature,
Mm-hmm.
and also the growing processes in plants and animals, because they reflect how we as human beings have also this visceral knowledge that living forward develops from inside in interaction with the environment. And it develops in interaction with the environment without that you have to know how to develop. That's what we think of how plants grow and animals have this visceral knowledge. But a human being has more than just this visceral knowledge. As soon as the cortex develops, we also have this capacity to reflect on what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's an opportunity, but that can also be a way of closing down, or a way of thinking that you can have power over it. And as soon as this reflection capacity develops, it becomes an opportunity to create, because you can you have more power on how you can direct a little bit more the life energy, or you can make choices and how you will relate to it. And for me, the art of living is about knowing the in the situation what's the difference between how you can encourage living forward, but also being aware that by closing it into structure bound things, life gets less, and you are blocking living forward. So this is the human capacity that we can use in different ways, for better and for worse.
When you use the term the art of living, I'm thinking that you're talking about this as more maybe than just a therapeutic intervention, to use that horrible word. You're thinking of this as a way of living more deeply or more openly or something. Is that right?
It's of course, it is a way of living. Yes, it is a way of living. But by becoming a psychotherapist, I also developed my capacities to refine the use of words, to discover more about the power of how you use words, because you can use words in a way that you just block something, or you can use words as an invitation to open up to the more. And that's not only an art, it's also a discipline of developing this knowledge about how you can transform an interaction into a healing interaction, or into a therapeutic interaction. So it's more than art when you practice psychotherapy. There is this knowledge also about how people develop shadow sides, and how you can address this dark parts in human beings, and of course this whole way of living is you bring it into the psychotherapeutic session also. But being a psychotherapist is also a professional activity with a lot of knowledge and training in it.
Yeah, I'd like to say that back to you, because especially because you've used a word that I really like that replaces some words that I don't like so much. If I understand you, you're saying that working as a therapist, it has a kind of a balance. It sounded like you were saying that the therapist needs to be aware of their own being and sort of needs to be focusing themselves in a way to kind of sense the interaction that's happening with the client on the one hand. And that's something like what we could do in everyday life as well. But on the other hand, the therapist also needs to have, you're saying knowledge, training, but you use this word discipline. which I really like, because often the word is skills or techniques, and I don't like those words, but that word discipline captures it, because it's a thoughtfulness or something in your way of interacting. I'd love to hear more about, because I know we haven't even touched on this. I know that you have years of being a professor and training people and writing academic articles and stuff. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you developed FOT, or bringing focusing into therapy, how you see it sort of integrating into therapy, or anything about that you'd like to share. I'd be very curious about.
I was in some way very lucky that I started as a person-centered therapist. I was trained in the Rogerian approach, and with a lot of emphasis on the basic attitudes like empathy, unconditional positive regard, authenticity. And in some way, this was very helpful for me, that I didn't go into much theory right from the beginning, but that I had this training in how do you communicate your empathic attitude? What does it mean becoming more congruent? So, and of course, this very difficult attitude of unconditional positive regard, I had a lot of struggle about how do you practice that, and so becoming a therapist, it was quite this exploration of what does it mean and how can you communicate it. So and this goes hand in hand, because by communicating about how you practice it's also a way of deepening your understanding and reflecting on what's the impact when I say this, or when I use another word, what's the impact of that? So studying looking very carefully to the impact of how you communicate an attitude. It's for me also a very helpful way of deepening your understanding, and not just training a skill, but it is a way of learning to refine your language, for instance, the way you express something, and that's also something I try to bring in when I was teaching. Always this going back and forward to taking some pause, reflecting on what are you doing, what's the impact of it on the other person, and listening very carefully to all these small signals that you got, also the non-verbal signals. Right from the beginning, in the trainings, I try to invite my students to look and to sense what's the body communicating. and if you see that your client is like puzzling, take a pause and ask your client, take your time, how does this resonate with you? And so it's continuous interaction between expressing something, looking very carefully, what's the impact, reflecting on that, inviting the other person to give you feedback on it. So that's for me also the process of teaching, and because it's an experiential.
That's what I was thinking.
Training.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Um, I think what you're pointing out is that coming from the tradition of Rogers, you already were learning and valuing a very experiential way of reflecting on what's happening in the work.
Mhm,
Um, and the thing that I like about what you're saying is that, again, there's this balance between, you didn't say this part of it, but I could see it in you as you were talking about it,
mhm,
that there's this balance between the kind of the heartfelt genuineness
mhm.
of your being with the other person,
Yeah.
balanced with a kind of a real rigor that you're really watching all the time. What is actually happening here? How is my way of being with this person being received by them? And then using that reaction from them to inform the next thing that maybe you do or say.
Mhm,
And I was then thinking, how in the world do you teach that?
mhm.
And I answered it for myself. And then I think this is what you were saying. I was thinking, well, practice, practice, practice.
Yes, and what was for me very helpful also to see different role models.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and that was exactly what I enjoyed so much when Gendlin, when I could meet Gendlin in person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I immediately felt this recognition in myself. Yes, I love the freshness
Mm-hmm.
of his way of interacting. And that was something I missed sometimes with other teachers I observed or I had in my training. With Gendlin, there was this spontaneity that was more uh, vivid.
Yes.
And in some way, that felt also as, for me, a way of coming home. Because um, in the Rogerian approach, for me, it sometimes felt like I had to be too disciplined. like like I didn't sense enough freedom to just um, express something that I was sensing.
Okay.
And with Gendlin, it felt like a permission to just use my felt sense.
Mm-hmm.
That was different from the Rogerian tradition, where, as the name expresses it, client-centered.
Mm-hmm.
it, it was so much, the emphasis was so much on uh, listening very careful to the client and following the client, while I am a more active person.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, with Gentlin, this was for me like, this freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I felt really this permission of freedom,
Yes.
because that was what I loved so much also in his teaching, that I've never experienced his teaching as that he was presenting a theory or a practice as how we should do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have always experienced his way of doing as an inspiration for me.
Yes.
Like he was shedding a light on what could be my part.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree that there was a real watching him doing a demonstration with someone was encouraging rather than getting instructions.
Mhm,
Um, what you were saying a minute ago about the person-centered world, my training isn't person-centered. I kind of have been a little bit on the edge of that, mostly through focusing.
mhm.
Um, but I'm wondering if you were partly kind of pointing to what I understand as a bit of a kind of a tension maybe in the person-centered world and focusing about this question of being directive or non-directive.
Yes, I know.
Can you say something about that? I don't fully
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah. You might be aware that in Leuven we had the first international conference where we brought together Gendlin and the more traditional person-centered therapists. And there was a huge tension between different orientations. But I'm so grateful that in Leuven we never had that kind of tension. In Leuven we always integrated the Rogerian, the experiential, the existential, the interactional approach. We had always this obvious combination of all these. But when we organized that international conference, it was very obvious that for some of these, let me say, more orthodox Rogerians, it was quite like, you can't do that, being that directive. But for me, it doesn't have to do anything with being directive or guiding. For me, it is about the sensitivity to where is the life energy.
Yes.
And that's what Gendlin was doing. He wasn't directive, but he was sensitive to where is the stuckness in the process, and how can we take the living forward in that. And for me, that's not about guiding or being directive, but this is for me about choosing for the healthy part, or choosing for the living forward energy in it, and not staying in the stuckness and staying around where there is no life anymore.
Yeah.
And that is for me how the experiential approach opens up this some stuck pieces in where the Rogerians stayed at their same structure bound ideas. And so and that's maybe a tension that you can see everywhere in the world, that some people stuck to what they know and the old paradigms, and they are very resistant to change or to new ideas. So this is not only a problem in the psychotherapy world. It's a general, universal problem. This tension between the old and the new. While for me, it's not. The old and the new are for me no opposites. I love it as seeing these as poles where the energy moves between different poles. So it's the same with sometimes it seems as if they make opposites of following and guiding, but for me that's not they are no opposites. For me they are two sides of the same process, where you move between these poles, that you sometimes bring in something new, and then you try how you can connect it with where the person already is, or what the person already knows about it. And so this is a much more dynamic
Yes.
process.
Yeah, exactly. I can hear that there's the way that I would say it back. There's a couple of things I would say back in response. And I have to say, I'm already aware of time, that there's so much I would love to talk to you about. So we might have to see if we could do a part two, but I'm just going to relax about that. What I would say back to you is, I think a part of what you're saying is this maybe almost accusation of being directive. Um, it could actually be understood in a different way. And part of it is that in focusing, we're wanting to pay attention to everything that's happening. And often the client doesn't notice everything that's happening. And when we get these habitual ways of living where the body becomes invisible and we just live from the neck up. But if you know focusing as a therapist, you often know that something's happening in the client's body. And you're inviting more awareness of the whole phenomenon of at that moment. So it's very phenomenological. It's not you're trying to make something happen. It's you're just saying, look at everything that's happening right now. Not just what you usually look at, but everything.
Yeah.
So there's a more of an inclusive kind of awareness you're inviting for the client.
Yeah. And it's really this choice of carrying forward, of bringing in the life again.
That's what I wanted to ask about, because that's the second
And
thing.
not staying with the fixed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And of course people have this need for safety, and sometimes they think that safety is structure. And of course, in all the movements that are going on, there is a need for structure, and structure offers some clarity and some safety. But that doesn't mean that structure is like a fixed thing where life gets closed in and there is no more fresh air coming in. So for me, it's very much about not letting that happen, that life is no more going on, and that the structure takes it over, or some fixed ideas.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more about a very deep trust in the mystery of life, that life has some wisdom in itself, a wisdom of carrying forward, a wisdom of how to develop, how to grow. And for me, it's very respectful to the organismic wisdom that we try to bring in that vitality.
Let me say that back to you, because I think you said something really important there, a couple of things. But one thing I want to say back, which really captures something that I haven't put into words before, is just this assumption that safety means structure. And in fact, usually that means the assumption is that structure is something rigid and set and fixed that we can hold on to and that will never change. But I think you're also saying that there's also a safety in being able to trust the life forward direction. And that's a very different kind of grounding in one's own organism. It's one that has more movement and freshness, and it's almost more like a muscle that can stretch and grow. My question is, I'd love to have an example of kind of ways in which you would invite a life forward kind of space or energy from something that feels quite stuck for a client.
What touches me very often is that also in the focusing theories, we develop kind of structures and we give it a name. Like, for instance, we give it a name, the inner critic.
Yeah.
Or the inner child. Or and of course, it is important that we recognize some patterns that seem to come in and have an influence that the process gets stuck always in the same way, and then we could say, oh, that's my inner critic. The risk here is that we also approach inner critic as a kind of reality that has power over us. While what I love to do is having this attitude of understanding the protecting energy that was necessary at some stages.
Yeah.
That you couldn't relate to what's overpowering you, or you couldn't relate to the difficulties that were overwhelming you. And the living forward at that time was that there came in some helpful way at that moment. And it was kind of energy that worked for you to protect you for something worse. So it's very important that you can recognize this way of relating of human beings that we need sometimes to call in a kind of protection or kind of defensive mechanism.
Yeah.
So it is helpful that we have this knowledge about how people use that kind of mechanisms. But as soon as you make it a new structure, then it isn't serving life anymore.
Yeah.
And the art of being with it is that when the client refers to, oh, my inner critic is coming in, that you translate it again in a more fluid form, and that you take it in terms of energy. There's something is coming in that brings your energy back to a lower level, or that takes away your life energy in this situation.
Yeah.
So that's for me a way of respecting very much how it has been helpful for the client at some time in his or her life, and how it can become a structure that is no more adapted in this situation, in this actual situation, and that living forward is in the actual situation, asking for something new to come and not the old structure.
Yeah.
And it's not about it's bad that you have this way of naming it, but it's important that you are aware it's just a way of naming.
Yeah.
It's not a fixed reality.
Yes.
And sometimes people make this distinction no more. They live with it as if it is a fixed reality. The same with sickness. You can have a diagnosis for some sickness, And the mistake we can make is that with having this diagnosis, that this becomes like a fixed structure about what's the problem with your body.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh, I have this sickness. Well, for me, this name, for me, it's more like, okay, my body offers me a signal that it needs to do something different, that life is asking me to bring in something new in my process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just want to say a little bit of that back to you. The first thing is, and we can do this in focusing like in any other approach, we can begin to sort of reify a shorthand name, and we can slip into thinking that's all it is. It's the inner critic, as though that kind of captures it and sums it up. And I think what you're inviting is to actually go back to the experience itself and to sense freshly, what is this energy in you trying to do for you? That there's something life forward even in that, if you sense it
Yes,
freshly.
exactly.
That, I think that sounds really
Mm-hmm.
useful. And what it makes me want to ask you about is this. I mean, I know you've written about it, the life forward energy, and I'm curious about how you understand that, partly because I'm wondering if that is the way into some of your more spiritual kind of understandings of this process, which I know Gendlin was always so, I don't know, wary about kind of talking too much about. So I'm grateful that you have begun to sort of say more about that. And I'd be curious to know if
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if it's this emphasis on living forward that was the opening for
Yeah.
you.
In fact, for me, it is about the subtle energy.
Okay.
And Gendlin always has spoken about the subtle energy. His definition of a felt sense is already about this subtle
Mm-hmm.
energy. And this subtle energy, I for me, it's like we have the different elements. We have earth, that's very easy to understand because we can touch it, and
Mm-hmm.
our body is partly made of these earthly elements.
Yeah.
We have the element water, easy to understand for us because we see it in nature. Our body has this flowing capacity of the water energy in us. We have the fire energy, the element fire. We see this as the element that transforms literally the wood into something that's going up.
Yeah.
So we have this very easy elements to understand, although understand easy. Let me say we can, because we can touch it and see it, and these are more in our sensory
Mm-hmm.
repertoire. We
Yeah.
think we know about it.
They seem more
That's
familiar
more
to us.
easy.
Yeah.
And then we have this air element, the oxygen that and these are the elements that for me, they teach me very much about life because they are all around. My body is made of it. And then we have the most subtle element that is out of reach of what we can see or touch,
Mm-hmm.
but we can experience it. The moment that we can experience it is the most clearly when a new life starts. we can't explain how does it begin, but we experience the moment that new life is there as soon as you can, in your perception, you have this earthly, bodily felt elements. But we are sensitive to the subtle element, the pure energetic, I call it. And it's always such a struggle. How do you name it? And we use different names for it. Maybe the best way I can understand is this such a subtle element that we can only see in when it is taking shape in what we can see, like our body. So, but Gendlin has always spoken about having a felt sense is more than just the physical sensation. It's always about that you have this awareness about the more. And we can't explain how life starts. Science is developing more and more, and more scientific instruments are successful in finding more and more in the cosmos about how life develops. But still, there is the mystery. And here again, the names you use for it, that's not the important thing. The problem arises when people take a name as this is it.
Yeah.
And there the confusion starts, because you might use a name that's different from the name that I use, and then we think, oh no, this is not the same. And that's also the problem with the word spiritual. It's just a word for what I would call this subtle energy. And a materialistic view on the world has much problems with it, because it can't recognize the subtle element as reality.
Yeah. Can I say that back to you? I want to just say it back to you, just to make sure I'm following it. That there are these elements that make up life, and it's earth, water, fire, air. These are the ones that are more familiar to us, and we have access to them through our senses, and especially vision and touch and those kind of senses. But you're saying there's also this subtle energy that we can experience it, but we can't touch it or see it in the same way. So it's easier to overlook it. It's easier to maybe misunderstand it. And then when we feel it and we get interested in it, our human response, like with, I think, most things, is we want to kind of pin it down and give it a name and try to make it into something more substantial. And that's where we get into problems. We kind of somehow lose the message when we try to do that to it.
Yeah, yeah. Nevertheless, in the focusing attitude of the presence, that is the subtle energy.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not so important what name you use for it. For me, it's more important that the names we use for it can help us to develop that capacity.
Yes.
So if we speak of presence, or if we speak of love, or if we speak of compassion, or if we speak of hope, or if we speak of joy, of the most important thing is that you can experience what's the impact when you experience joy, when you experience hope, when you experience the compassion of another person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the subtle energy working.
So let me ask about that. You're saying that, like, when we pay attention to a felt sense, we're bringing this kind of focusing attitude, this kind of presence to maybe a subtle feeling in the body.
Mhm.
But you're saying that this subtle energy that you're talking about is actually in that kind of awareness that we bring to the body?
Yeah. This subtle energy is necessary
Mm-hmm.
to relate to what we experience in the body.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And in response, this is where I'm wondering if you will accept this. In response, the felt sense becomes more than just a physically felt tension in the body, for example. It also becomes more subtle. The subtle sort of energy of the presence and the awareness we bring to the body evokes more subtle energy in the body itself.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah, you could also use the metaphor of light.
Mm-hmm.
Light can only be perceived if there is darkness. And you can experience the subtle energy also as shedding some light on
Mm-hmm.
what's there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you can't see light in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
But you experience immediately
Yeah.
when light is coming
Yeah.
in something.
Yes.
And that's another metaphor uh,
Yeah.
to address this difficult difficult to name
Mm-hmm.
reality, but it is a reality,
Yes.
and we
And it,
need some words to
yeah.
address it. Otherwise, it's how can we develop it more in ourselves if we don't have words to
Mm-hmm.
name it? But
Yeah.
the words are not that. The words are just
Yeah.
stepping stones or bridges.
If we remind ourselves that the words we're using are metaphors, they aren't explanations that pin it down. But I want to go back to the metaphor you used of light. Um, the thing that I find fascinating is that shining a light, using that metaphor, on the felt sense, somehow that brings more life. That the body responds to that in a particular way. It's almost like the body says, that's what I've been waiting for. Now I
Yes.
become more alive. And it's curious to me that that's what's needed. It's that particular kind of quality of attention, that particular kind of subtle energy.
Yeah.
Do you have any understanding of why it's that brings more life?
I think that's the huge existential question. Uh, what's the origin of life?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and this is also that there is for me this understanding of the mystery. It's very paradoxical to speak about understanding the mystery. um, let's say for me it's more finding some ways to approach the mystery.
Yeah.
And finding some little entrances that for me are helpful to enter that mysterious field. But it doesn't mean that I can't experience it.
Yes.
And I need some words, I need some very concrete, for instance, nature can also be my doorway to the mystery. And I need this very concrete expressions.
Yeah.
Be it words, be it objects, be it another person.
Yeah.
Bringing that for you. Yeah. It's always about the experience of some presence, the experience of some lightness, the experience of an expansion, and the experience of more than this small being with the problems and the difficult situation I can be in. It's always this more, and it's not just stupid idea. It's not magical thinking.
Yeah,
it's reality that everyone can experience the reality of the difference when there is a person with you and a person that embodies these pure qualities, that it makes a difference for you. Yeah. Everyone can experience that.
Yeah.
And we can't say, as in the medical world, they have for a long time said that's just placebo. They use the word placebo for something that they can't explain in the materialistic view. But it's not placebo. It is the real impact of that subtle energy.
Yeah. I find that very intriguing and very inspiring, and also encouraging somehow.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's encouraging because it also makes me aware of I'm just part of something much bigger. And yeah, it's also this paradoxical reality. I am small, and at the same time I can do a lot. And that's encouraging.
And for me, the other paradox that comes, and this might not be for everyone, but for me, there's something about that being so palpably, tangibly part of a larger reality that gives me a sense of safety. It makes me feel held by something much greater than myself.
Yeah. But again, this is how you look at it. You look at it that it gives you safety. Well, the same reality, another person can view it as I feel lost and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Overwhelmed or ungrounded or something.
Yeah, I'm just an insignificant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sorry that we're out of time. I've really enjoyed talking to you and listening to you, and maybe at some point we could do it again.
It's also your quality of a listener that's so powerful in the interaction.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish?
I want to say to you how much I appreciate the service you are doing for our focusing community. Because what I love to say is the focusing community is for me such a precious new social reality that we are sharing something and we are encouraging and supporting each other in how can we bring this. It's quite a new vision on reality, and it isn't easy because it's not the way that the Western world views reality.
Yeah.
And that also is for me how I can understand why focusing is not so easy for many people to understand what it really is. And from that makes it so important for me that we have this supporting group of people who share this process view, because it's also, this is something very new in the world, not taking things as fixed things, but as processes. And it's so difficult to speak about this process quality because you can't put it in these categories that people love to hear.
Yeah.
So that's why I so much appreciate also your service of trying to make this kaleidoscope of views, and that you invite several people is also a very nice example that we don't have to have the same view on it. We have this freedom that each of us develops an experiential understanding that fits into his or her situation. And we all live in different situations, and that's why it's so enriching that we can approach all these different situations with different views, and it's no contradiction. It's not another truth. It's just many facets of this ongoing process, and that's what I highly value in being this community of people with this process view on reality.
Yes, I thank you, and I really agree that we want all of the points of view, not just one. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you, Gersh,
Yeah,
for
my
this
pleasure.
encounter.
Yeah, thanks very much. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.